The lights were low, the soft sound of laughter filled the room, and the aroma of freshly baked cake mingled with the perfume of the flowers decorating the table. It was her 30th birthday, a milestone. Friends, relatives, all gathered to celebrate this woman, who until then believed she had a stable life, a perfect family, a solid marriage. Her husband seemed loving, smiling, and her daughter, radiant, ran to her with a tight hug. The night had everything to be unforgettable, and it was, but not in the way she imagined. Amid raised glasses and lively toasts, the husband stood up. He asked for silence, saying he wanted to make the moment even more special. Anticipation filled the air like sparks. He held a small box wrapped in gold paper, bearing the discreet logo of a luxury jewelry store. She smiled. After all, after so many years together, perhaps he had finally prepared something just for her. Her heart beat faster, but then he turned around. His smile widened, and the gift was given to his daughter. An awkward silence filled the room for a moment. Everyone applauded, captivated by the elegant watch that gleamed under the lights. "A symbol of responsibility," he said, as he placed the watch on the girl's wrist. She, in turn, applauded with the others, disguising the lump growing in her throat. A forced smile, trembling hands holding the glass. Inside, something was breaking. An invisible fissure was beginning to open in her heart. The party went on, but nothing felt the same anymore. The laughter seemed distant. The clinking of cutlery echoed as if time had slowed down. She looked at the new watch gleaming on her daughter's wrist and wondered, why didn't he think of me? Why does this gift seem wrong? That night, something changed, and she didn't know it yet, but that clock would be the first sign of a much bigger secret. Applause echoed through the hall, but to her, the sound was distant, as if underwater. Her smile remained frozen, her eyes fixed on her, a daughter who admired the gleam of the clock, while her husband laughed contentedly. Inside, her stomach churned, a subtle discomfort beginning to grow. It was as if the world around her had slowed down, and the only sound she heard was the beating of her own heart. Why would he do that? Why today of all days? Why now? The question echoed in her mind, insistent, almost painful. She watched her husband with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. He didn't notice her gaze, or pretended not to. He continued talking about how that gift symbolized maturity, how he wanted to teach his daughter the value of time. But to her, those words sounded hollow. A watch to teach the value of time? What kind of lesson was that, when the gesture seemed like a cruel reminder that, in the invisible hierarchy of that house, she came second? The glass in her hand trembled. She tried to hide it, smiling when someone called her over to take a picture. In the image, no one would notice the pain. Just another portrait of a perfect family. But her gaze, if anyone paid attention, betrayed everything. A lost, tense look of someone who had just seen something she preferred not to see. As the party went on, the atmosphere felt suffocating. The lights that had once brought joy now seemed too bright, almost aggressive. People's laughter hurt. The watch, gleaming on her daughter's wrist, became a kind of symbol of the discomfort she was trying to swallow. When the guests left, she collected the glasses, straightened the table, and forced herself to maintain composure. But the silence between her and her husband was deafening. He avoided her gaze, acting as if nothing had happened, and in that heavy silence, she realized something new. The love she believed to be solid was full of cracks, and perhaps that night the first one had finally opened. In the days following the party, the house seemed the same, but something within it had changed. The watch, still gleaming on her daughter's wrist, seemed to carry an invisible weight. Her husband continued with his routine, the same smile, the same kind words. But for her, every gesture now had a different meaning. He began to notice details that had previously gone unnoticed. He connected his face to the gleam of the watch and felt a pang of suspicion. One night he was in his office, speaking softly on the phone. When she approached, he immediately ended the call, claiming it was work-related. The response was natural, but his fleeting glance betrayed him. The next day she noticed he had changed his computer password, something he had never done before. When she asked, he laughed and said it was for security, and she, with the same tense smile from the party, pretended to believe him. Messages on his cell phone started disappearing. Whenever he received a notification, he would turn the device face down. Sometimes he would say he was going to the bank or to take care of company matters, but he would return wearing the same perfume as someone else, a subtle feminine fragrance that wasn't hers. Small things, so small they could be coincidences if they weren't all happening at the same time. The nights grew longer. While he slept soundly, she tossed and turned in bed, her heart restless. She remembered the clock, his words, and the strange gleam of satisfaction on his face when everyone applauded. She tried to convince herself it was just paranoia, but deep down she knew it wasn't. She began to notice the joint, account statements, small withdrawals, round amounts always made on Fridays. Personal expenses, he would say, but something was wrong. Each day, another piece appeared, and that puzzle she didn't know existed was beginning to take shape. It was no longer just an inconvenient gift. It was a sign, a silent warning that her life was about to change, and not by chance. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her husband breathed deeply beside her, calm, as if nothing were out of place. But inside, her heart pounded. Something screamed that there was more behind that behavior. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she looked at him and wondered, "What are you hiding from me?" The clock in the room showed almost 2 in the morning when she made a decision. She got up slowly, picked up his laptop from the desk and opened it. The screen lit up like a beacon in the dark. Her hands trembled as she typed the password. She tried dates, names, birthdays. She made a few mistakes, until instinctively she typed her daughter's name, and the computer unlocked. A shiver ran down her spine. There was his digital life exposed before her, like a book she had never been allowed to open. It started with emails. Most were professional, but there were recently deleted messages with nonsensical titles. She clicked on a hidden folder and found a history of financial transfers, large, repeated amounts sent to an unknown account. In the corner of the receipt, the name of a bank she had never seen before, and International Bank, discreet, with an address in another country. Her heart raced. This wasn't just a purchase nor a simple saving. It was something planned. She opened her browser history and found searches about investments, opening accounts abroad, and even real estate in the name of third parties. Her breath caught in her throat. The pieces that hadn't made sense before began to fall into place. She quickly closed the laptop when he stirred in bed. The clicking sound seemed too loud. He lay, back down, pretending to sleep, but her mind was awake, seething. He knew he couldn't ignore what he had seen. That early morning marked the point of no return. It was no longer just suspicion. It was a growing certainty that a huge secret was about to be revealed. Dawn arrived, but the sun seemed too afraid to enter through the window. She spent the night awake, reviewing every image, every number, every detail of that unfamiliar account. The bank's name still echoed in her mind like an enigma. While her husband calmly drank his coffee, she watched him in silence, trying to imagine what else might be hidden behind that calm smile. He spoke of work, of weekend plans, and everything inside her screamed that those words were part of a charade. As soon as he left, she went back to her laptop. She needed to know more. She logged back into her email account and found the direct access link to that bank. An authentication code was sent to his phone, which luckily was lying on the table. Her heart raced. She typed in the code and logged in. The screen loaded, revealing what seemed like an abyss. An account in his name, opened more than 2 years ago. The numbers didn't lie. There were regular deposits, but none matched the salary he claimed to receive. They were large amounts, periodic transfers from different sources, and even worse, frequent transactions to the same name. A familiar name, but one that sent a shiver down my spine. His ex-girlfriend's. Her hands were sweating. Scrolling through the screen was like watching a betrayal unfold in real time. There were travel payments, hotel reservations, jewelry store purchases, and even a receipt for a watch identical to the one he had given his daughter. It was impossible to deny what was before her. For a moment she thought about closing the computer and pretending none of it existed, but the impulse was stronger. She saved all the receipts, printed the statements, and kept everything in a folder with the care of someone preparing a truth to be revealed at the right moment. Her heart was heavy, but along with it something new was born, the need for justice. That morning, looking in the mirror, she realized that something inside her had changed forever. She was no longer just a woman betrayed by indifference. She was someone ready to uncover the full extent of the lie that surrounded her. The following hours were a whirlwind of emotions. Her stomach ached, her head throbbed, and each breath felt heavy. Sitting in front of the computer, with the receipts scattered across the table, she felt she was about to cross a point of no return. She decided to delve deeper into the investigation. The name that appeared in the transfers, that surname identical to her husband's, wouldn't leave her mind. At first she thought it might be some distant relative, someone from the family, but something inside her told her it wasn't a coincidence. She searched the name on the internet. Her hands trembled as she typed, the cursor blinking like a compass of the growing tension. When the photo appeared on the screen, she gasped for air. It was a beautiful, elegant woman, with the same smile her husband always praised in other people. And there, in the corner of an old social network, was the confirmation she feared. The woman was an ex-girlfriend of his from many years ago. Her heart tightened. The account opening date coincided exactly with the period when he began to be away from home more often, justifying it with long business trips. Suddenly everything made sense. The deleted messages, the apologies, the regular transfers. He had been silently supporting another woman, but the final blow came when she found, among the receipts, a purchase slip from a luxury jewelry store, the same store where he had bought the gift for his daughter. The model, the price, the date, everything matched. It was the same watch, just a different color. That gift he had given with such pride in front of everyone was, in fact, a symbolic copy of something he had already given to the other girl. Tears began to stream down her face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of contained fury, of a disappointment that burned inside. She realized she had never truly known the man she slept with every night, and for the first time, she understood that the clock that marked time in his life was not the same one that marked hers. At that moment, she swore to herself that the truth would not remain hidden. She spent the entire day mentally rehearsing what she would say. She wanted to remain calm, avoid tears, not give him the power to see her breakdown. She washed her face, dressed calmly, and prepared dinner as if nothing were happening. Inside, however, every gesture was calculated, every silence laden with meaning. She knew that night would mark the beginning of the end, or perhaps the beginning of her own life. The table was set, the candles lit, the smell of food wafted through. The house. He arrived smiling, talking about work, about how productive his day had been. He sat at the table, served himself, and began to eat as if everything were in perfect order. She watched him in silence. Every movement of his seemed like a staged act of falsehood. Their daughter, cheerful, talked about school, showing off the new watch on her wrist. That golden gleam, which had once symbolized pride, now seemed to mock her. Then, without saying a word, she opened her purse and took out an envelope. She placed it on the table between the plates. The sound of the paper was enough to stop his laughter. He looked at her, confused, and opened the envelope. Inside, the bank statements, the transfers, the receipts, the other woman's name. His face lost its color. For a few seconds there was absolute silence. The daughter looked from one to the other, not understanding what was happening. The air seemed too heavy to breathe. He tried to compose himself, swallowed hard, and forced a nervous smile. This isn't what it looks like," he stammered. "It's an investment, a joint venture. You wouldn't understand." She kept her eyes fixed on him, cold and still. She said nothing. She just looked at him, and in that look was everything. Disappointment, pain, the end of trust. He looked away, unable to maintain his charade. His daughter lowered her head, sensing that something serious was happening. The food grew cold, the silence stretched on, and in that instant, she knew. She didn't need any more explanations. The truth was laid bare on the table, and no justification could erase what he had done. That night, after the confrontation, she didn't cry. What she felt was no longer pain, it was clarity. She sat on the edge of the bed, took a deep breath and realized that anger had transformed into determination. There was no point in shouting or begging for explanations. He had already shown who he really was, and she finally saw clearly what had previously been hidden, behind sweet words and calculated gestures. From that moment on, she decided to act with intelligence, not emotion. The following morning, as he left for work as if nothing had happened, she began to organize her plan. She gathered all the documents, bank statements, and evidence and put them in a folder. She researched a lawyer specializing in family law and scheduled a meeting. She didn't want revenge. She wanted justice. She needed to ensure that her daughter wouldn't pay the price for her father's dishonesty. In the lawyer's office, she told everything. Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke, it gained firmness. She showed the papers, explained the deposits, the lies, the watch. The lawyer listened in silence and at the end said something that stuck in her mind. "You didn't lose a husband. You just discovered who he really is, and that is freedom." Those words resonated within her. For the first time in a long time, she felt strong. She returned home and began reviewing. The assets, the contracts, the names in the records, everything that had previously seemed like his territory was now part of a new chessboard, one in which she finally had control. Her silent revenge would not be destruction, it would be reconstruction. From that day on, every step was calculated, opening a new account in her name, separating her finances, planning for the future, and above all, recovering something she had lost without realizing it, her own dignity. Love can be blind, but awakening is always lucid, and in that lucidity she began to write the first chapter of the woman she would become again, alone, but whole. The following days were silent, but no longer the same heavy silence as before. It was a silence of new beginnings. The house seemed larger, the air lighter, and for the first time in a long time, she could breathe without feeling the weight of distrust. Her daughter's clock, once a symbol of the wound, was now just a distant reminder of a story that had ended. She looked at it and thought, it wasn't time that betrayed me. It was me who took too long to see it. During long afternoons spent alone, she reflected on everything. She came to the conclusion that betrayal isn't always about another person. Sometimes, the greatest betrayal is against the truth we try to hide from ourselves to keep up appearances, to sustain a love that no longer exists, to avoid admitting we're being deceived. She realized she had spent years believing in a role that wasn't real, wearing a marriage that only existed on the outside. But at 30, ironically, the gift she received wasn't the luxury watch. It was freedom. The freedom to see, to choose herself, to understand that time doesn't heal everything, but reveals everything. The clock marks the hours, but the truth marks destiny, and she finally understood that every second spent believing a lie is a second stolen from her own life. Now, looking back, she didn't see a victim, but a woman reborn. The pain that had broken her had also shaped her. Humiliation had become strength. Abandonment had become drive. She learned that true love is not the kind that binds, but the kind that liberates, and that sometimes it's necessary to lose everything that seems stable in order to discover the value of being at peace with oneself. At 30, she didn't receive jewels, flowers, or promises. She received something far more valuable, the truth, and with it, the power to rewrite her own story. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a peace she hadn't known in a long time. The storm had passed, and in the silence that remained, she finally recognized herself. The face in the mirror was no longer that of a wounded woman, but of someone who had survived. Survived the lies, the contempt, the invisibility. And more than that, she had conquered her own fear. The fear of being alone, the fear of starting over, the fear of seeing what had always been right before her eyes. Over time, she learned that life doesn't always give us what we want, but it always shows us what we need to see. That birthday night, the watch gleaming on her daughter's wrist, the hidden bill, the confrontation, all of that was part of a bigger plan, a painful but necessary process to free her from the illusion she was living in. Today, she looks back and understands. The most precious gift she received wasn't in a jewelry box, but in her awakening. Sometimes, the most precious gift is precisely the one that reveals people's true worth, and the price of truth, though high, is the only one worth paying. She moves forward, stronger, lighter, more aware that time doesn't erase, but teaches. The clock that once symbolized pain now marks a new beginning, that of a woman who has learned that self-love is the most precious thing there is. And now she asks you, and you? Have you discovered something that changed everything? How many truths have you ignored to maintain an appearance of happiness? How many times have you accepted less than you deserved just to avoid upsetting others? Share your story in the comments. Someone might recognize themselves in your words. And if this video touched you, share. Perhaps someone, in silence, needs to hear this today, to remember that the truth sets you free and that pain, when embraced, can transform into strength.